Thank you for that introduction, and I'm very happy to be here with you guys today. So I will tell you, I much prefer text, so I have notes on my phone, and I'm not really great at making PowerPoints, but I did make you this one slide that you can look at during my presentation, so that's what I have to offer today. So as he mentioned, I do work at the Quantum Insider, which is owned by Resonance. And we are known for being one of the leading news assets in quantum technology. And so I've spent the past year writing quite excessively about quantum, which I absolutely love. And so my presentation today is a lot about that experience, what the challenges are, and what I really would like all of you to take away from this session today. So a bit of a call to action. So that being said, I really love writing about quantum technology, which is great because I have to do it all day long. But what's really great about working at the Quantum Insider is that we're not just news, we actually have market intelligence. And so what we do with our market intelligence is we provide strategic advisory for governments, national labs, research institutes, and partners within industry. And so something that I absolutely love about my job is getting the opportunity to go visit clients and go do site visits. And I will tell you that what I notice time and time again is there is nothing quite like the look of joy on a scientist's face when there is a visitor there asking them to tell them about their scientific research. And as brought up earlier today, they always start at the beginning. They always want to start at the very beginning, the fundamentals of quantum mechanics. They want to show you bracket notation, and they want to talk about energy levels. And they're very, very excited to do so. But what happens when you start at that level is you do tend to lose your audience a bit. And so this is something that I really wanted to talk a lot about today in this discussion is how do we reach broader audiences and how do we create communication that is accessible to the general public so that we can promote understanding. And so the thing about quantum right now is it's becoming more and more part of the mainstream narrative, which is really, really great. However, that does include some challenges. And so the more that quantum ends up in the mainstream narrative, the more that we have the ability to have funding as well as governments promoting national strategies, which is really great for industry as well. But it does create very unique challenges related to misrepresentation and confusion and oversimplification. And so this visibility actually creates this shared opportunity for all of us in the industry, but it also creates shared responsibility. And so I kind of want to take it back a year when I first decided to write about quantum technology, and I started a daily newsletter. And so in starting this daily newsletter, I thought if I can write about quantum computing, then I can start to learn about this on a deeper level. My background is in physics. However, I did not get a formal education in quantum computing, so this was very much a self-discovery type of journey for me. And so where I expected to learn through writing, and I didn't actually expect many people to pay attention to my newsletter as I wasn't already in the industry. But what happened was it became there were more eyes on it than I expected there to be over time, and I ended up learning a lot from the community itself. And so there's something really great about journalism where you don't only immerse yourself in these new fields and you get to learn about new topics, but you also get to learn from your audience. So something really great about the quantum community is they're very generous with their feedback. And so if you write something that's incorrect, they're so incredibly kind to provide some really lovely emails for you. And so I learned a lot through the community that way. But the other really great thing about the quantum community is that scientists are actually really open to tell you what they would like to see more of. And so I had a lot of really incredible conversations where we talked about where we need to focus communication. And so what we came back to over and over again is that we need more communication around use cases related to quantum technology. And so I really centered my newsletter around how can I provide information around how researchers and scientists are using quantum technology in innovative ways. And so I started writing about all these different quantum applications. And then again, the community was incredibly generous to tell me, that's better, but not quite right. And so what I found was there are two ways we can think about quantum applications. So there are applications that we do not have a solution using classical computers. And so if we have the potential to solve it using a quantum computer, and it also benefits society, then we can say, yes, we should use a quantum computer. So the other scenario is we can get a good enough solution using a classical computer, and we can also get a more precise solution using a quantum computer. But do the trade-offs necessitate the use of a quantum computer? Because obviously these are not fully commercial, and so there are trade-offs related to, we're still discussing energy consumption, but there's also the cost of using a quantum computer and also limited accessibility. And so what the community wanted to understand is, how do we start to quantify where we should use a quantum computer in these very nuanced situations? And so by creating this interface where I could interact with the community through my writing, I also started to learn a lot more about the community so that I could better tailor my writing to serve what they needed. And so this was my kind of foray into storytelling and science communications. And I really came to fall in love with it. I've always been a reader. I've always enjoyed a great story. But what this led me to think about is how storytelling is so essential to what it means to be human. We've always told stories. Before we could speak, we had cave paintings. And when we had language, we told stories around a campfire. And this was a really great way for us to share knowledge amongst ourselves and pass down lessons that we've learned. And this is very, very essential to the act of doing science as well. So during one of my site visits to the Brookhaven National Laboratory in the US, the scientist who worked on the light beam told me, the light source, said that one of their favorite parts about their experiments was in the downtime, when they had the opportunity to meet with other scientists who were visiting from other countries, and they could share knowledge about the projects that they were working on. And this led them to more insight that could influence their research as well. And so this is what's really incredible about how storytelling and science are actually very deeply connected. Now, talking about quantum and writing about quantum is really exciting, but it's not without its challenges. And I know if the presenters have really touched on a lot of these topics already. But quantum is abstract, it's invisible. So while quantum technology does power everyday things such as our phones, a lot of people don't realize that, and they don't get to see it on a regular basis. And so it's very difficult to talk about a technology that isn't necessarily super visible, or to talk about phenomenon that isn't super visible, especially when there's a general gap in knowledge related to physics and quantum mechanics. And so most people in the US are not necessarily exposed to physics unless they go on to university and they pursue a degree related to physical science and engineering and mathematics. And so there aren't many people who are super familiar with quantum phenomenon, as all of us in this room know. And what happens when you have this knowledge gap is that it leads to less funding. It leads to deprioritizing certain education or certain initiatives, and it also leads to slowed market adoption. And then where you have this gap between technology and understanding, it's really common that misconceptions and myths will kind of fill that empty space. And so this has led to a lot of hype headlines in quantum, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, and also underexplained scientific developments. There are even very large companies that have come out with very over-promising announcements that have later been stepped back a bit because the explanation wasn't quite there, the proof wasn't quite there. And so bad communication can actually cause great harm, especially to a developing industry like quantum. And so now that we know a bit more about the challenges, to kind of speak to the solutions, there are ways in which we as journalists and those of us who are actively trying to tell the story can create solutions to reach a broader audience. And so one thing I would like to bring up there is a scientist who works at Quantinuum, Dr. Bob Cueca, who has co-authored a book called Quantum in Pictures. And so he uses diagrams, doesn't replace the math, but he uses diagrams to reach a broader audience and teach them fundamentals about quantum science. And so this is one way that we can use communication to reach a broader audience while we're still keeping the science intact, but we're not necessarily starting at the basics of what is a qubit. And I realized I spoke really fast, so I'm about to wrap this up. But my main goal that I wanted to talk to you about here today is that science doesn't necessarily speak for itself. The people who are in communications have to do a lot of the talking. But there's a lot of room in quantum technology to bring in people from different backgrounds who have a different perspective and can tell the story in a different way. And so if you want to be involved in quantum technology, you don't have to build a qubit necessarily. You can if you want to, but we do need to build more bridges between the technology itself and public understanding. And that's all I have for you today. So thank you.
For your talk.